best examples we can show of what you can do by doing a little bit of studying, picking a subject that, in my opinion, is very important for most of the western states, but also significant nationally, and in this case for not only human health, but also biodiversity. And to use the SSURGO and the SSURGO database to create these maps is quite significant. I know that when we've shared this particular valley fever habitat model outside the agency, people have been very excited about what Bob has done here. So I'm going to just leave it at that. I want him to, don't want to take away any of the thunder of all the wonderful work he's done on this, and just to send it back to you all.
Well, thank you, Maxine. Hopefully I'm not going to let people down with what actually comes out here today. Excuse me. What I want to talk about today is actually, the appropriate title is Mapping Soil as a Habitat for the Saprophytic Stage of Coccidioides, which is a fungus that is the causal agent for the disease known as valley fever. So just in case you don't know, and and to just make sure we're all on the same page, let's see here if I can, I'm gonna figure out how to change, oh, there we go, it's like this. All right, got it. And where's the little buttons?
Down here.
Oh man, you expect me to see those things?
It'll be there.
Oh, okay. Technology. Valley fever, or as the scientists would call it, Coccidioides mycosis, is a disease caused by a soil-borne fungi, actually two different kinds of fungi, the Immitis and the Coccidioides species of the Coccidioides. And they're subtly different, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. The disease itself is also called California fever, desert rheumatism, San Joaquin Valley fever, and a few other things like that. Endemic to the southwestern United States and a few other places of similar climate in the Western Hemisphere, although strangely enough, or maybe good enough, it doesn't seem to occur in the Middle East or Africa and those kinds of places. Although the climates would be similar, it has not yet been identified there. Although I can't help but to wonder if it hasn't been transported there with various and sundry military equipment, because the spores are fairly durable and they can travel on stuff, fomites they call it. But so far only identified in the Western Hemisphere. And you see a little bit of the distribution. Should be able to use the arrow here so people out in the world can see. Southwestern United States, a few places here in South America. A lot of it in southwestern United States, and we'll look at that a little closer, I think. A little closer on the distribution. Real hot spots in San Joaquin Valley, around in the valley in California, hence valley fever. But also in Arizona, pretty hot spots. And the thing to point out or notice right off the bat is the distribution is patchy, even at this, kind of a coarse spatial scale. We're already seeing it's a patchy kind of thing. It doesn't occur everywhere. And that's kind of germane, and we'll talk more about that later. This slide here is kind of an interesting one, in that it's looking at the pathogen is picked up and carried in the dust. And you can see how wind currents have carried the dust, clear up to New England. And this is from I think 1943. It's a study that was done by the Navy of recruits coming into San Diego, where they'd known about the disease, and they were testing people just to see who had been exposed to it. Even in the 40s, they were able to do this. And so they're mapping out places where people had come from that reacted to the antigens. And I would think that a lot of us have had this disease and had no idea at all that we had it, because, why would somebody in Pennsylvania even think about having the, desert rheumatism? And so it's kind of a peculiar thing. Well, you can pick it up traveling, or it can be in the wind. All those nice red sunsets that you see out there, those are bad, man. Those are lethal. No, I'm just kidding. I hope.
Red skies, sailors. Red sky at night, sailors.
Yeah, that's right.
Red sky in the morning, sailors take morning.
And so then you can also think, well, all right, so what's the deal? What's so big about this? Well, one thing that's noticeable, or we've noticed, is that the number of cases, instances, has been increasing dramatically lately. And there's probably a variety of reasons for that. Increased population in the area is one thing. More people traveling to the desert, another. Increased development and dust. You always have to remember that stuff travels in the wind. The spores travel in the wind, not necessarily attached to dust particles, but as dust particles. And that's germane. And climate change, whether it's long-term climate change or just normal year-to-year variation in rainfall and temperature patterns, and that's germane too. We'll talk about that some more. So that's how the number of the increase in cases for that time span. Risk factors. Anybody can get it, valley fever, and they might not even know they've had it. It might be like a cold, might be like a flu. For about 95% of people, it's not a big deal. Sometimes it can take quite a while to get over, which makes me wonder about things that we talk about fibromyalgia and things like that we don't associate with what might be the causal agent. Older adults, one thing, it doesn't spread from person to person. Apparently, we have to inhale the arthroconidia and not the spherules that might be associated with a person once they've developed the disease. Some groups are more likely, more at risk. Military personnel, because everything in the military makes dust. I think they even have dust on aircraft carriers. Somewhere or another, even the ships in the sea have dust. But helicopters kick up dust, Humvees kick up dust. You crawl into dust, and so.
Since 1995, we've pushed hundreds of thousands of troops through the southwestern states.
Yep. And lots of them were probably some more of the more susceptible people to it. They're more susceptible to particularly disseminated form, and that's the one that can quite often kill people. So that's kind of the risk factors. Agricultural workers, archaeologists get it. And there was a Northbridge earthquake a few years ago, kicked up a lot of dust, and they could see the spike in the valley fever cases after that earthquake because of the dust that was generated by it. So that's kind of interesting. So we're talking about this fungus. What's the life cycle of it like? It lives in the soil. The saprophytic saprophytic. It eats other things. It's a fungus. It's got to have organic carbon to live. It doesn't make it itself. Lives in the soil as mycelia and hyphae. The hyphae break up into arthroconidia, and they're dust-sized particles. And they move in the wind until something breathes them in. You know, dogs get this disease, horses, especially dogs, because what do dogs sniff at? They sniff at little holes in the ground where there's a little more organic carbon in these holes because there's animals associated with them. So dogs, you know, that's an occupational hazard of the dog is valley fever. Horses get it because, you know, a horse has got to have its head down to eat. I imagine cows get it, but apparently they don't care about cows because most of the data has been for horses. So I guess that tells you what's valuable. I don't know.
You don't live long enough.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So you breathe them in, and arthroconidia change into spheroids, spherules, which mature and burst into, you know, thousands of endospores, which grow into new spherules, and that cycle continues until your body finally overcomes it, or not. So that's kind of the life cycle of the disease. Interesting points about it. You're talking about it's you know, it's depends on the fungus. It's got to have moisture and to be able to grow, and then it has to be dry in order for the arthrospores, arthroconidia to blow around. So those two things compete. You know, dryness for spore movement, wetness for growth. And you see in places where you have, they're aridic, or as I say, not xeric, you know, not quite level, but you know, more uniform distributions through time of the instances of disease. And this is in Tucson, Arizona, which is, you know, it's not xeric. So then, you go out to California in the Great Valley, and you can see there's definitely the rainfall it's xeric, and so you have the peaks of the instances of the disease associated with just after the, you know, once it dries out. So it's wet enough, the fungus grows, gets dry, and they blow around. And those are things you have to, you know, the first thing you got to keep in mind. So if you're going to control a disease, control dust, which I think in California right now is a cast iron son of a gun because there's no irrigation water for your yard or anything like that. So they've got to have lots of dust since they haven't had rain for quite some time. And so I would expect this, associated with this drought, we should be seeing a kind of a spike. Maybe not though. Maybe there hasn't been enough wetness to grow the fungus to provide the spores for the spikes. I guess that remains to be seen. So that's in a xeric area, the kind of distribution through time. So we're talking about not just spatial, place to place, but also year to year and during the year variation. Symptoms. I guess we need to talk about symptoms. We've done that a little bit already. For most people, it's just a fever, cough, you know, which makes you think we could have had this and I had no idea, because for most people it's just like a cold or a flu. It might take a while to get over, but it doesn't seem like lately the flu's been taking longer to get over, yeah? But in that small percentage of people, the people that are susceptible to having the disseminated form, let's see here, there's the arrow. You get, you know, pneumonia that spreads from the lungs, meningitis, and, you know, all kinds of nasty skin lesions, and it's you know, really nasty, the disseminated form. It's bad enough to talk. I didn't want to put pictures of it. So, you start to think now, what's this thing really need for its habitat? The classical habitat is what they call the lower Sonoran life zone, which sounds like something that's an ecological site, right? So our ecosite stuff can start talking, addressing these kinds of human health issues too, maybe. 200 or 300 millimeters of rain, 10 and a half, 23 degrees mean annual air temperature. Although it's not so much the mean, it's the spikes that really are the important part. And it's difficult to get that out of the transactional database, but we can work a little magic to approximate it. It's got to have organic matter. It's a fungus. This has to have salts associated with it. And the theory on that is that the fungus itself, the Coccidioides, doesn't necessarily need the salts, but the combination of the heat and the salt kills its competitors, so it doesn't get eaten by other things. So you subdue its competitors with the heat and the salt, and this Coccidioides just can struggle through and be able to complete its life cycle. And they've noticed there's two different varieties of it, the Immitis and the Posidacea, which they talk about where they occur. The Xeric is in California, the non-Xeric variety is in Arizona. So I think it's probably the species itself has adapted to different climatic regimes. At least they're subtly different. Actually, that's quite a bit of difference between Xeric and Aritic. So those are the kinds of things we can start thinking about putting into a model. And so the objective is to use SSURGO, or let us say SSURGO-like data, because the lookup table or tabular stuff comes out of NASIS, which is the transactional database. It's similar to SSURGO, but different. It's like French vanilla versus plain vanilla, maybe. Maybe it's not quite even that different. And then using the spatial side of SSURGO, which in this case is, well, one of the maps is 2015 gSSURGO that I got from Steve Peasley, so it's hot off the press. This will be the first public uses of 2015 gSSURGO. And we'll look at that in a little bit. But what you can do is when you're looking at SSURGO level data, your spatial resolution is such that you can pick up individual places where we think is probably, is at least more likely to occur, such that you could plan some kind of preventative measures for dust control. Or I suppose you could spread fungicide on the ground too. I don't know. Why not? Could be an experiment. So the parameters I put in the model, into the NASIS part, into the fuzzy system. In places I thought were Xeric, I let I can't even see that. I have to hold up my paper so I can see it. One of the benefits of old age is being able to tune out things you don't want to see. For the optimal temperature for the Xeric areas, it's about 16 degrees Celsius. And optimum in the non-Xeric about 19, so about 3 degrees difference in the mean annual air. About 150 millimeters different in the rainfall, a little bit more rainfall in the Xeric, a little less in the non-Xeric. And we talked about heat because you have to be able to burn off, basically sterilize the other soil critters out. So we'll look for a south aspect, low albedo, which means a high absorbance, fairly moderate slope, so you get the good cosine angle, so you can really heat that surface up to kill off basically the competitors to the Coccidioides. Also it's got to have some salts, some organic matter. It's got to have some water retention because it's a fungus. It needs to have water at least for a short time, and so you have to have some water retention. And the slope shape is such that it can gather the spores and the water too. So those are most of the parameters stuck in the model. That's kind of what things look like in a NASIS kind of sense. You can see the, oops, that's not what I'm trying to do. Various sub-rules in the model with their hedges. Operator overall. Sometimes I think that's not the right operator. I don't know. This needs some more refinement. The somewhat hedge takes a square root of the numbers. It has a tendency to kind of compress the distribution of the fuzzy numbers. It makes it so it's less spread out. The really low numbers get pulled up, but the higher numbers, closer to 1 numbers, don't change. And this hedge is a scaling factor just to get things closer to 1. So it's just adjusting the shape of the fuzzy set a little bit, or the position of it really. So that's the model in a nutshell. So I can run that against data in the database and come up with a map. And you can't see that map. I thought I'd have big screen. Maybe I can do this. And you can see that anyways. That you can see better. Of course, now I can't get to my air hose or anything like that. The cursor goes out over the ether, though, I guess. So you can see the hot spot here in the valley. Pretty hot around Phoenix here. Hot spots here in Texas. Some possible places up here. There was an archaeological dig up here where a bunch of archaeologists were digging. It had been a hot, dry summer. Of course, they're college students, invincible, so they didn't need masks. And so out of about 50 kids, about 30 of them got real sick. And you can see that's really on the fringe, or just out of the, the real likely range of the organism. But it's temporal, temporally variant too. And so that was a hot, dry year, so it was able to live that year. And then there was another instance in the Dinosaur National Park, around in here. Again, just on the fringe, but a hot, dry summer, and a bunch of people got sick there too. And what else did I want to say about this? So also, you can see it's patchy. The distribution is patchy, so it ought to be such that you can start to target areas for dust control, or however else you might want to control this. The map itself, this is 2014 gSSURGO. You can see the SSURGO-free areas here. That's what we call places that are not COM. Those are SSURGO-free areas. There's a few people that understand that. And so, all right, that's nice. You can put a bunch of numbers in and make a map. What's it mean, or does it relate to anything? And if I put this back down here, put the next screen up, or next slide up, expand that, then you can see that, remember that this is another model that just used climate, and I don't know why they didn't use soil in this model. But again, the valley here around Phoenix and this stretch in Texas. And there's other models also that, that use various climatic or epidemiological data to try to map out where this is occurring. There was one study in California where they used web soil survey, that kind of data, but they didn't do really much processing of the soil data in that particular study. But at least they did see web soil survey cited in the article. This is what they call the climatic niche model. Can't remember what GARP stands for precisely. Okay, so we had this model, and one of the things we really are kind of curious about this day and age is changing in the climate. See, what could happen? You know, we don't just warm up the climate and make ourselves, you know, use our air conditioners a little more. There's lots of feedback loops in the climate in terms of health and growth of crops, a whole lot of things that are impacted by a change in the climate. Now, I have warming here. You know, you could probably look at cooling as well just to cover the bases. I didn't look at cooling for this. But you can see that there's kind of a northward, where did that arrow go? Oh, it is. There it is. A northward and upward trend to the spatial distribution of the hot spots, the red areas. And so these things up around the dinosaur, lost the pointer again, there it is. Up here in Utah, they start to be pretty good habitat once you warm the climate up some. I might also mention the legend there. The green areas probably aren't habitat and probably can't be because they're not salty enough, they're too wet, or not hot enough. The yellow areas in some years could very well turn out to be habitat. And the orange areas probably are most of the time, and the red areas are just about certainly habitat all the time. We've got the maestro here.
Next.
That's the last one there. Because you don't just change the mean annual air temperature. When that changes, there's climatic feedback too. Of course, things like the frost-free days and the growing degree days will go up, probably. Precipitation is impacted too. Most of the models I've seen say that at least in the domain of corn, the rain will go up, but in the Northwest, probably not. In Texas, probably not. Probably not an increase in rainfall, and probably a decrease in the effective precipitation because the evapotranspiration will be higher. And so those are, you know, kind of the feedback loops that will affect, you know, human health issues and animal health issues as well as growth of crops with climate change. And I think that's about it. So just to recap there, the disease valley fever is caused by a fungus that lives in the soil. And so that makes it something we can, you know, get at with soil data. The agent itself blows in the wind with dust or as dust. So, so again, you have soil parameters like disturbance that, you know, we can control or measure or at least note. It's expensive disease in Southwest. It takes a long time to get over, expensive to treat with all these different fungicides. But we can probably at least get at the areas that are most likely to be habitat for the fungus and either, you know, keep the dust down or I haven't read anything about killing the fungus in the ground. I don't know why they don't mention that because we use fungicides all the time agriculturally, but I've never seen any articles mention that, which I don't know, seems kind of peculiar in retrospect. But that's all I have today. Thanks for listening.